Today's Crimetober video is kindly brought to you by Raycon. Go to buyraycon.com/Kendall Rae to get 15% off your next favorite pair of earbuds. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to Crimetober. If you did not catch my last video, I have decided to replace Freak Week with an entire month of darker true crime cases called Crimetober. There still will be 7 videos just spread out throughout the month so that I can really take my time on these. And I'm still taking requests. So if you have any, leave them in the comments. Also, I'm doing Crimetober over on my podcast, Mile Higher Podcast. And our podcast is on YouTube. It's on Spotify, iTunes, everywhere you listen to podcasts, but it is on YouTube to watch as well. So I will link that below, as well as my husband's podcast, Lights Out. He definitely goes into some of the darkest cases out there. So if you like that type of content, you'd probably really like his show as well. But anyway, today we're gonna be talking about a very famous and highly requested case that I'm surprised I haven't covered yet, honestly. I covered this on my podcast a while back, but since then there's been a pretty big update. According to Russian officials, this case has been solved, and I will explain that. So I wanted to take another look at it here on my channel. Today we're gonna be talking about the Dyatlov Pass, and this is a Russian case. There's a ton of Russian names, and I am about as bad as it gets when it comes to pronunciation of Russian things. I am sure I will get something wrong in this video. If I do, I apologize, but I'm gonna do my absolute best to say these names as correct as possible. This is a very well-known case all around the world, and up until recently, it has been unsolved. However, a lot of people still don't think it's solved. I am one of those people. I do not believe they have solved this mystery. You'll have to let me know your thoughts once I explain all of this, but there are so many different theories out there that I won't even be able to cover them all in this video because there are so many and they're all over the place. But I narrowed down the most interesting ones, and I really want to know your thoughts on this case. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So back in 1959, there was a group of graduate students that decided that they wanted to go on an expedition. This was a skiing expedition across the northern Ural Mountains in northern Soviet Union, which is now Russia. And like I said, everyone in the group was a graduate student. And not only that, they were very high-level hikers. They were all wanting to improve their grade level on their certification. And so they decided that taking a break from their studies and going on this expedition was perfect. They heard that Mount Oratin was very beautiful and that it also would help them gain a higher grade in their certification level for hiking. So these are experienced hikers. That's very important to note. They all have a lot of skills when it comes to being outdoors. The group consisted of 8 men and 2 women, and they all had at least grade 2 certification. And after they completed this expedition, that would actually jump up to grade 3. So that was the goal. Igor Dyatlov, who is a 23-year-old radio engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, was the leader who assembled this group of 9 others. And most of them were just peers and people he met through the university. The goal of the expedition was to reach Otorten. So in January of 1959, the group headed out on their expedition. They arrived by train in the town of Evdel in the early morning hours of January 25th. Then they took a truck to Vizhai, which is a village that is the last inhabited settlement to the north. So this is the last place that they saw any other people. They spent the night there and they bought a bunch of loaves of bread so that they could stock up for their trip. The following day was going to be a big chunk of the hike, and they had to make sure that they had enough fuel. So one thing that's really nice and interesting in this case is there are several diary entries from the different hikers. So we have kind of an idea of what they were doing that day. However, it's not in English. I don't know how to translate it, and I couldn't find anywhere that had translated it super well. But they also did have cameras, and so there are a couple pictures to look at here, which is interesting. So on January 27th, they began their trek from Vizhai to Otorten. On January 28th, one of the members of the group, his name is Yuri Yudin, and he had to turn back because he was having joint problems in his knee, and he just could not make the hike, which was a total bummer for him at the time, but looking back, he was very lucky he did not continue on with them. On January 31st, they ended up at the edge of a highland area and started preparing to climb it. There was a wooded valley, and they set up camp there, had a bunch of their food stored, equipment and stuff that they would need for the way back. And then the following day on February 1st, the hikers started to move through the pass. It seemed like their plan was to go over the pass and make camp on the other side once they had gotten there, but they did not get the chance to do this. The weather was getting a lot worse, and this was a rough time of year. It's February, it's pretty cold, shitty conditions. It's the Russian mountains. And because snowstorms were really starting to pick up in the area, this really decreased their visibility and they ended up getting lost. And they deviated up west toward Kolytsiakul. So I'm not sure if at any point during this they realized that they were lost. They probably did. They ended up deciding to make their camp there for the night at the bottom of a mountain slope. Now, unfortunately, they could have kept going about 1.5 kilometers and they would have made it to this wooded area, which would have given them a lot more protection from the elements outside. But they decided to set up camp right at the bottom of the slope in the open, and little did they know this would be the last time they would set up camp. So the leader of the group, Dyatlov, had told everyone back at home that they expected to be back around February 12th. Of course, this was a rough estimate. You know, it's really hard to say exactly how long something like that is gonna take, especially back then. So when they didn't arrive back on the 12th, everyone just thought, you know, it was taking a little longer and they would be back eventually. But then the 13th came, and the 14th, and the 15th, and the 16th, and eventually their family started to get really concerned. It wasn't until the 20th that the alarm was really raised. Relatives of the hikers had to demand that a rescue was done for their loved ones. And finally, search groups were sent out that included students from the university, rescue groups, and just other volunteers. After a while of searching with no luck, the police and army ended up joining in on the search as well. Eventually they had planes, helicopters, dogs, anything that they could use was brought out to find these hikers. It wasn't until February 26th, 6 days after they started looking, that the hikers were finally found. So they had been out there for quite a bit at this time. So first they just found their campsite, abandoned and damaged. And the campsite instantly baffled the whole search team. They had never seen anything like this and they could not explain what was going on. The tent was half torn down and covered in snow. It was empty and all the group's belongings were still inside the tent, including their clothes and their shoes. And what's super strange is it wasn't just unzipped like normal. It was cut open from the inside. So someone had to get out of there very quickly. In February, the Ural Mountains have an average temperature of 16.6 degrees Celsius, which is 2.1 degrees Fahrenheit, which is well below the freezing point. However, the hikers had left all of their cold weather gear behind, including their hats, their mittens, their long johns, everything that you could possibly want to stay warm in the cold was left behind. The tent contained 3 axes and 2 finished knives that were mainly used for carving. One hiker, Semyon Dyatlov, left the tent like the rest of them, but took his camera. Now that's really interesting to think about. Clearly they were in some type of emergency situation if they left without their cold weather gear. If they cut their way out of the tent, there was clearly a sense of urgency. But what made him grab that camera? That's what gets me, is there must have been something interesting enough that you would want to capture it, even if you know you could potentially die. To prioritize your camera over cold weather gear in the Russian mountains makes me think that something pretty spectacular might have been out there. But I don't know. There were 8 or 9 sets of footprints found, and some of them were not wearing shoes, or they were wearing just one shoe, or they just had on socks. Some of them were completely barefoot on the snow. They were able to follow the footprints down to the edge of this wooded area, and this was on the opposite side of the pass, so decently far away from their campsite. And eventually they did find their bodies. 5 of them were nearly naked. Some of them were only wearing socks. Investigators were immediately perplexed about how this group of trained hikers who were very familiar with the climate of Russia would go out into the wilderness in the middle of the mountain in February with no clothes on. So most people think that the hikers experienced a case of paradoxal undressing. This happens in people who have hypothermia, where it's kind of a reverse effect. It only happens for some people, but you actually feel like you're burning. It's actually because the nerves in your blood vessels are suffering from paralysis, and it gives you this false sense that your body's almost on fire. So sometimes people will completely strip down when they have hypothermia. And it seems like this could have been the case here, but we're not sure. Then they found 4 other hikers that did have clothes on, but they weren't their clothes. They were the clothes of the other hikers that had left their tent. So it is possible that they stripped their friends after they had already passed, so it might not have actually been the paradoxical undressing. But why did they need to put on the other hikers' clothes? Why didn't they just have their own on? This clearly was some type of last-ditch effort to stay warm and survive the elements. So things are already starting to look really, really weird, but it gets weirder. What's super strange about this case is all of the victims here have different injuries that are very different. The first 2 team members that were found were Yuri D and Yuri K, and they were found the closest to the tent, and their hands were absolutely destroyed. When they were found, they were basically just bloody stumps that were all mangled and raw. And there were trees nearby that had human flesh embedded into the bark. So it seemed like they may have possibly tried to climb up trees very quickly in an effort to escape whatever came after them, whatever was attacking them. Igor Dyatlov was found shortly after them. He was found on his back with his hands on his chest. His jacket was unbuttoned and he was just laying there. Now he had probably the least severe injuries of the whole group. He just had some minor scrapes and abrasions. And when I say minor, they were still bad, don't get me wrong. But compared to everyone else, another hiker named Rustam was found shortly after this, and his skull was severely fractured. He had a 6-inch fracture on the side of his head. However, they still believe that even though he had this injury, that he died of hypothermia, which all of them were said to have died of hypothermia. However, there is a lot of controversy over that, so you'll have to let me know what you think. Then they found Zanadia, one of the females who was in the group, and she had many injuries on her face, but the most damage was on her hands as well. They just look like bloody masses pretty much. They also had severe frostbite and really bad abrasions. And at that time, they were the only hikers that were found. It took 2 additional months for them to find the rest of the group. And when they did, they found one of the hikers named Nikolai, well dressed surprisingly, but he was under layers of snow. His skull had been bashed in, his jaw was broken, he was severely fractured in several different parts of his body, and just overall in really bad condition. Then they found Alexander and Semyon, and their injuries were even stranger. Semyon was actually missing his eyeballs as well as the tissue around his eye. His skull had a wide, deep wound, and his chest had been so compressed by something that his ribs split apart. Then they found Alexander, who also was missing the soft tissue around his eye area. He also had an open wound on his skull behind his ear, but one of the most shocking discoveries was the last hiker that was found. I believe her name is Lyudmila. I'm not sure if that is correct. I'm really sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but she was found with all of the soft tissue on her face missing. Oftentimes this can happen from animals in the wild, and they were out in nature, so that's probably what it was. But there's a lot of theories. Not only that though, both of her eyes were missing. Her nose had been completely crushed down into her skull. Her mouth was positioned almost screaming, like frozen that way. And the weirdest part was her tongue was missing. It had been completely removed. Now there's a ton of debate about what could have done this. Was it an attacker? Was it a person? Was it some unknown force? Was it animals? Everyone has a different opinion on this one, it seems. I literally just went and threw up. And this is why I don't do cases that are this dark. So obviously they had no idea what happened. All of the bodies were so drastically different in their injuries. And the big question was, what caused their panic? What caused their injuries? What happened here? I mean, the families really wanted to know, but also people wanted to know. Once word started getting back about how these bodies were found, people were freaked out and wanted answers. A medical examiner looked at all of the bodies and they determined that all of them died of hypothermia. But they didn't just close the case there. They wrote down that an unknown compelling force was used to injure and kill this group of hikers. That was all that was said, and there was no strong idea put forth about what this compelling force could be. And once investigators and reporters were reporting back to the people about this unknown compelling force, this really started to drive up a lot of interest. However, the case was abruptly closed by the Russian government. Not only that, the Russian government took all documentation and all possible causes of death and sealed them. They did this by issuing a government resolution. This basically just means case closed, don't ask any more questions. And even though no official investigation continued, tons of people did their own investigations. There was reenactments done trying to figure out what the hell happened at Dyatlov Pass. It only took a couple of months before the inquest was completely closed in May of 1959, and this was due to the absence of a guilty party. And because they acted so sketchy about everything and we never got an official answer about this, people have made their own. There are quite a few theories out there, so I wanted to go over them and I want you to let me know what you think is most likely. The one thing that is absolutely bizarre about the way that these hikers were found, other than the horrible condition that they were in, all of their clothes were radioactive. Yes, radioactive. All the fibers of their clothing had extremely high levels of radiation that could not be explained. Not only that, but the campsite itself had very high levels of radiation. And when they had funerals for the hikers, many of their family members and friends at the funeral noticed that their skin seemed to be glowing this unnatural orange color, and their hair was gray, and none of them had gray hair yet. And this orange coloration is thought to possibly be caused by the radiation in their body. Now, right around this time, there were a lot of weapons being tested by the Russians, by everyone in the world pretty much. But it's thought that maybe the radiation could be from some type of nuclear weapons that were being tested near this area by the Russian government. Maybe they were in a testing zone and that they didn't know anyone would possibly be out there. However, Russian authorities say that this is just not true and that there was no nuclear testing going on in this area. Some people thought that maybe this area was just high in radiation naturally, that it was just spewing from the ground or something, but this was also proven to not be true. So we're not sure what the radiation is from. So of course, with such a bizarre case like this that is unsolved, there are going to be supernatural theories. First up, aliens. Could aliens have done this to this group? You guys know I believe in aliens, but I don't know if I believe that this group was attacked by aliens. It was later found out that the night that the hikers were out there, there was some weirdness going on in the sky. Another set of hikers who were quite a distance from this group claimed to have seen orange orbs, glowing circles in the sky. So people think that these could have been UFOs, and they also point to the fact that some of the trees in the area, the tops of them were kind of charred off and burnt, which some people think could have been caused by a UFO. Now, during this era, the idea of UFOs being a possibility was considered to be ridiculous and completely unheard of. But many researchers actually wrote down that this could be a possibility. And what's really strange is some investigators were actually blocked from looking at documents. So if you don't know what the KGB is, translated to English, it stands for the Committee for State Security, which is basically a secret police force. And this was the main security agency for the Soviet Union back in the day. And apparently they were threatening some of the researchers to not push the idea of UFOs. And according to him, he was forced to give up any notes that he had taken down or information that he had regarding UFOs. So this, as you can imagine, started up a lot of theories. Why is the government acting so sketchy if they have nothing to hide here? And the fact that this was all just shut down so fast seems really, really odd. A lot of people have theorized that maybe this group came across a group of aliens that did not want to be discovered, and so they killed them. I think the main reason that people believe this is because of the missing tongue and the missing soft tissue around the eye area, but this definitely could be an animal, as fun as it is to believe the alien theory. I don't know if I believe that. I feel like if aliens were into doing that, then we would see more cases of people with their tongues cut out, but I don't know. So many of you are probably wondering about that camera. Was anything captured on that camera? When they looked at the photos that were taken by the group, most of them were just normal pictures, group photos by mountains or by the campfire, whatever it is. However, there is this photo. It's really eerie, and this is the last image on the camera. It shows some type of bright object moving against a dark background, but you really can't tell what it is. And this image is called the 33rd frame. And researchers actually found this camera on an improvised tripod. The lens cap was open and the camera was ready to shoot. It seemed like the hikers wanted to capture whatever it was that attacked them, whatever it was that killed them. And it seemed to be pointing kind of upwards toward the mountain. So what could they have been trying to capture? Then there is the KGB theory. The theory goes that a few of the hikers were actually undercover agents for the KGB. And they were supposed to be meeting with some Americans to do some type of controlled delivery. And this would be some type of trick that they'd be playing on the Americans. And the theory goes that the American group figured out that the Russian group was trying to fool them and freaked out and killed them brutally. I don't think that theory makes a whole lot of sense. I don't know about you guys. I don't know why they would kill them like that. It doesn't explain the stripping. It doesn't explain why they're in different places. It doesn't make sense. Then there is the avalanche theory, which is the theory that the government has really gone with. It's a theory that an avalanche caused the hiker's death, which is kind of hard to imagine. The theory goes that the group woke up to the sound of an avalanche and panicked. Thought they had to get out of the tent as fast as they could, so they cut their way out because it would be worse to be trapped in a tent under an avalanche than it would to be having no tent because it's cut open. And this theory could possibly explain why they were only partially clothed. Maybe they ran out of the tent, you know, in their jammies essentially, or maybe some of them were sleeping naked or whatever, and they had to get out in a hurry. They were woken up out of sleep, ran out of the tent, got hypothermia, died. Maybe in the darkness of the night, once they left the tent, they got separated and confused and lost. They thought that maybe one group had tried to build a fire, and that would explain the burning on their hands, and that the other group tried to return back to the tent to get their clothes, didn't make it, and died of hypothermia. Now, while this theory could be possible, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, and a lot of people have pointed out that there's some flaws in it. First of all, the location of this incident didn't have any obvious signs that an avalanche had taken place there. An avalanche would have left certain patterns where things were knocked down and debris, but none of that was there. Their bodies were only covered in a light layer of snow, nothing that was too crazy like an avalanche worth of snow. And chances are an avalanche would have actually picked up their bodies and swept them away. So that doesn't really make much sense. There have been over 100 expeditions in that area since this all happened, and none of them have reported an avalanche happening. None of them have even reported conditions that would cause an avalanche, so it's very unlikely. And now experts have even looked at the area with up-to-date technology and have figured out that the chances of an avalanche happening in that area are very, very slim. Also, many of these hikers were really experienced, and they were experienced in skiing as well, and would know better than to make camp in an area where there could be an avalanche. And then there is the infrasound theory, which is very interesting. This was created by a man named Donnie Icar, and he actually published this theory in a book in 2013 called Dead Mountain. And in the book, he talks about the wind going around the mountain and creating some type of vortex. And apparently, this can create some type of infrasound that can create panic in humans. So essentially that infrasound created by the wind could have made the hikers go crazy, essentially. They could have been physically uncomfortable, mentally unaware of what was happening, and just in serious panic and distress. He said that this could cause them to just leave their tent by all means necessary, including cutting out of it and getting out of there without really logically thinking about what they're doing. He said once they eventually got further away from this area that the infrasound may not have been affecting them anymore. They kind of came back to their normal mind state, but by that time they're out there, they're stranded, they don't have clothes, and they got hypothermia and died. But it doesn't really explain all the other injuries. Well, the theory actually does technically explain that the injuries were caused by them like running and falling and just being chaotic. But that doesn't make that much sense to me. I don't know. I feel like the injuries were a lot worse than that. Then there is the idea that they were the victims of parachute mine testing. This goes back to the idea of the government testing something in this area, but this time it's parachute mines. People believe that maybe this campsite was in a testing area. This theory goes that the hikers were woken up by some type of loud explosions. This caused them to leave the tent in a panic, hence why they didn't get any of their shit and cut themselves right out of there. And once they got out, they found themselves unable to return. Maybe the visibility was bad, or they were too far, they didn't know where they were, whatever. They believe that some of the injuries could have been from parachute mines. They could have accidentally gotten in the way. And what's crazy is there is record of the Soviet Union testing parachute mines in this area around the time of the incident. Now, if you don't know what a parachute mine is, it's essentially a mine that explodes in the air versus under the ground. So I think this theory actually makes some sense and could be possible. That also could explain the glowing orbs in the sky, whatever they were seeing. Maybe they decided to take pictures of it because they didn't know what it was. Maybe it was government testing, and maybe that's why they wanted to hush hush on that, because it was their fault. This could explain the radioactivity as well, and it's possible that this could have caused some of the weird discoloration in their bodies, but it's also possible that their bodies and their hair color color naturally changed just due to the natural mummification process over months. Then of course there is the Yeti theory, definitely one of the most popular. In 2014, the Discovery Channel ran a special on this whole idea and a Russian Yeti. And this documentary actually looked into two theories. One of them was the Yeti theory, and I'll jump into that in a sec. But the other theory was that they were attacked by the Mansi people. There is a tribe of people that have lived in this mountain pass forever, and this mountain means a lot to them. So there's theories that they could have gotten angry that this group was trespassing and killed them. However, the Mansi people aren't known for being violent, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's not really any other evidence for that. You'd think there'd be something left behind or something found that would have made that theory a little stronger, but there really isn't. And then the Yeti theory, there isn't much to that either. The documentary basically said that these injuries could only be caused by something supernatural, possibly a Yeti, something that we've, never really studied, that it could only be a creature with superhuman strength to possibly make these injuries happen. But they didn't really give any actual evidence for it other than just being like, these injuries are weird and it was probably something crazy. Unfortunately, we need a little more than that, but it's possible. I mean, there could be Yetis out there. You never know. This world is crazy. But like I said, this case has been recently solved by the Russians. Earlier this year, investigators decided to take another look at the case after there have been many requests to finally get to the bottom of what happened to these hikers. And after looking at all the evidence in the case and all the possible theories, they've officially come to the conclusion that the causes of death were avalanche and hypothermia. And I just have a really hard time believing that. I really don't believe that this was an avalanche. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Wouldn't you have seen some proof of an avalanche in that area? Also, I don't think the injuries make sense. I don't think any of it makes sense. I think they don't know what the fuck happened and they just want to put a ribbon on it and call it a day. Of course, researchers say that the reason that their tongues and that fleshy area was gone around their eyes is because of wild animals, and that very well could be the case. That does happen, but it could be something paranormal. You guys will have to let me know what you think. Now, what's crazy is there is a Dyatlov Foundation, and they actually came forward and said that they think this whole conclusion is bullshit. They refuse to accept that it's just natural causes. They said it doesn't make sense. And so a lot of people think that this is a cover-up. There are a ton of other theories. I heard someone say that there was over 75 theories on this case, which is insane. But I want to know what you think happened to this group of hikers. Do you think it was something natural? Do you think it was something paranormal? Do you think it was something conspiratorial? But before I go, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about today's sponsor, Raycon. If you have not heard of Raycon, they are wireless earbuds that were created by Ray J. I just got this pair in blue and I absolutely love the color. They come in this super cute small case that's easy to throw in your purse with you on the go, and they charge right in there, which is super, super convenient. So you can have your sound with you wherever you are. I listen to my music, my audiobooks, my podcasts, all on my Raycon earbuds. And what I truly love about these earbuds, and I've said this before, they are super, super comfortable. I have really weird ears. I feel like they're like misshapen or something, and oftentimes earbuds really hurt my ears, but these do not. They're comfortable. I can even sleep in them on planes, which is absolutely key for me. This model here is the Everyday E25s. They are fantastic. And what's cool about Raycon is they offer a 45-day free return policy so that you can make sure that they're the earbuds for you. So go check it out at buyraycon.com/Kendall Rae. That will give you 15% off your next favorite pair of earbuds. Thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring this video. I hope you guys are enjoying Crimetober so far. If you are, make sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe if you're not already. Maybe even hit that notification bell. I'll see you guys in my next Crimetober video, but until then, stay safe and stay spooky.